Yes, sir.
Colonel, it's my honor to meet you today. I'm retired Marine George Barcellet. I'm also retired from the Veterans Affairs as a Veterans Counselor. I'd like to answer some of the questions that some of my veterans were talking about PTSD. You can basically do anything you like to do with PTSD unless you want to become a pilot. Okay? You're not going to get that pilot license. Okay? Or if you want to go into law enforcement, okay, and carry a gun. But if you want to go into the film industry, yes, you can. Okay? Well, another question I have, Colonel, is how the New York Film Academy, how do they work with the VA for VA tuition? Are they working closely?
Oh yeah, I mean there's a VA coordinator who handles all of that.
Okay.
It's done for you.
Great.
Very, very simple. Somebody else said. Kevin.
Sure. Jack, we saw at the beginning of this film and talked about your experience in Vietnam. You had some closure. So you went back, you got a little more intelligent. Can you give us a feel of that?
Oh, I'll give, very quickly, I'd never been back to Vietnam until 3 years ago. And I got an opportunity to go back there. And the guy who organized it, you know, the United States has a lot of business in Vietnam. We employ a lot of people making air conditioners, elevator parts, and all the rest, a lot of which we sell to China. So the American companies employ a lot of Vietnamese. One of the CEOs was going over there and asked me if I'd like to go. I said, I'd really love to go. I'd never been back. I gave him the 6-digit grid coordinate of where I fought. And the government found the enemy commander after all, about 45 years. He was 82 years old, living next door to a bicycle repair shop. And came south from Saigon about 3.5 hours in the van, and NBC shot 2 5-minute packages that were shown on nightly news in 2 successive nights. Now, you were CBS, you know, a 5-minute package and a 22-minute show, and in 2 successive nights. That's really quite astonishing. It must have been a slow news week, but they showed it, and it was really quite astounding. I get off the government had dressed them up in a uniform, and it had these hard epaulets like this here that had a silver braid on it. It was really hard. I get off, and he gives me this big hug and cuts my lip on his epaulette. And I said in Vietnamese, "You wounded me again, you bastard." Except I didn't say bastard, it was much, much worse. And he threw his head back and laughed and laughed. We spent about 2 hours talking about the battle. I learned a lot of things that I had suspected but didn't know for sure. And some things that I had known but he confirmed, and still other things I hadn't known. We went over the maps and we talked about it for a long, long time. Just 2 old soldiers talking about what it was like 45 years earlier. I told Brian that there was going to be a lot. There were going to be a lot of rotten emails saying you suck and Jacob sucks and consorting with the enemy and all the rest of that. None of that happened. As a matter of fact, I got a lot of emails from Vietnam veterans who said exactly the opposite, and that it was cathartic for them to actually watch this. And I mean, I wasn't taking a stand on anything. I just wanted to talk to the guy and find out what happened. I mean, I'm just a professional soldier, and so was he. And I wanted to find out what was going on, and it was enlightening to me. Great fun. I mean, not fun. I mean, I went back actually to the battlefield. There were a couple of shots of the field from which I was medevaced, and it was. I mean, there was a great deal of emotion involved being back there. But it was, but I looked at it from an academic standpoint. It was actually a great deal of fun. I enjoyed it. Fred?
Today's March 18th. What was the date of your battle in which you were?
March 9th.
March 9th.
March 9th. So it was about a week ago, 9 days ago, the 47th anniversary of my action. And I had forgotten it completely until one of my sons sent me an email and reminded me of it. It's interesting how you forget very, very quickly. CBS.
Colonel, I had a good question. Obviously, you know these horror stories of Vietnam veterans, their industries. I try to help a few. I live in Jersey, so I always go to Penn Station. What is the difference, you think, in your opinion, how you took your road and that Vietnam veteran that's in Penn Station right now, laying on the floor, where do you think those worlds parted, having the same or similar experiences?
Well, I'm not a fan of single factor analysis. I think there are a lot of things that cause lots of things. And if you say, well, A causes B, irrevocably, you're wrong. You're wrong in that only one thing causes. And as a matter of fact, we have a tendency sometimes to conflate causation and coincidence. Just because two things occur simultaneously doesn't mean that one has caused the other thing. But there are a lot of possible reasons. Upbringing. I mean, I don't know how those guys were raised. I know I was raised with very strong values, community values, and I think that stood me in good stead. I had a strong family background. I had two parents, and they were always there, and they always set me on the right course, and they belted me when I needed to get belted from time to time. I've got some great stories about. When I was in grade school, I went to grade school in New York City. They give us as an assignment, I finish it in like 2 microseconds, and I spend the next half hour throwing spitballs and getting into trouble. And I remember one time when I went home, I told my mother that my 3rd grade teacher, Mrs. Romano, hit me with her 18-inch ruler. Then my mother hit me. I mean, you know, so I learned pretty quickly to wise up and behave properly, or if I'm not going to behave properly, not to get caught. Third, I had a very strong support system. And I was married, I had 2 kids, I had a lot of responsibility. I stayed in the Army, so my buds were around all the time. One of the things we lack nowadays when kids get out of the service is that you're in the service relying on everybody. You're all relying on each other. It's really quite comfortable. You know that if something goes wrong, the guy on your left and the guy on your right are going to take care of you because you take care of them too. Next thing you know, you're out and you're on your own. It's spooky. It's different. It's not as comfortable. But I spent 20 years in the Army, always surrounded by people I work with all the time. We all relied on one another. Even when I became a battalion commander, I had 750 people working for me. We were all in it together, you know. We're all in it together. When you feel like you're not in it together and you're on your own, it's extremely difficult. That may be another contributing factor. I was working for a living. A lot of people got out of the service and weren't working for a living, couldn't find work. And then if you don't have a support group and you had a bad background and you're not working, it's really easy to spiral down very, very quickly, and there's nobody there to catch you. Yes, ma'am, you know all about this.
I'm going to be annoying and ask you a question I asked you this morning, but for the benefit of everybody else, to this gentleman's question from CBS, we're doing a better job now.
We are doing a much better job.
Certainly we discussed this morning, services that were available to you were practically zero.
No, there was zero.
So I think that you would agree that there are folks out there that are getting help that wouldn't have 4 years.
Well, I'll tell you, we run the whole operation differently. When I went to Vietnam, I was in the 82nd. I got orders to go to Vietnam, and along with the orders was a note that said you had 28 days to vacate your quarters. So I had 28 days to find some place for my wife and 2 kids to live, because we had individual replacements. We don't do that anymore. The unit deploys, family stays there, support group for the family, troops are together, troops come back, they're all together. They're all together over there, they're all together over here. We didn't do that at all. It's not surprising. That's a very good point. It's not surprising we have Vietnam veterans who start flying up their own backside. They had never had any support. Sent them to Vietnam, you're on your own. Your family's on its own. You're on your own. We wised up. We don't do that anymore. I've got to tell you, another thing we do is we actually train people properly nowadays. The first time I was ever in a live fire exercise was in combat. We don't do that anymore either. So we're much smarter at it, and that may account for, we did things stupidly back then. Yes, sir?
I have 2 comments to make and would like your reaction to them and, from your experience. After I got out of the service, it was about 1968, I couldn't find work. And I'm very appreciative that the Veterans Administration had the vocational rehabilitation program, because that sent me to a place, a college campus, for 4 years, where I could find myself and also be busy. Now, I want to make a comparison between those who didn't serve didn't disrupt their education, didn't disrupt their lives, didn't have any disability. They were 4 years ahead of me, and maybe even 8 years ahead of me, because they didn't serve. So the point is I and my fellow soldiers, we were at a disadvantage, and they felt threatened.
Yeah, there's that, sure.
I mean, we live in a competitive world. Why should I try to take his job away from him in the near future?
Well, if there are fewer jobs than there are people, then of course you got that problem. Somebody asked me not that long ago, would you go back and do it again? Like, I got interviewed. And I said, well, I wouldn't do anything the same way. I certainly wouldn't get married when I was 12. But would I go back and serve? And my answer is, of course I would. And there are people who didn't serve, guys who you say are 4 or 8 years or light years ahead of you. If you get them up against the wall, they A, feel guilty, and they probably should.
And some of them don't feel guilty.
No, well,
even today, you can say, where were you?
I'm sure they do. I'm sure they don't. I'm sure there are plenty of people who don't feel guilty. But there are lots of them who do. And they say if they had to do all over again, they would not have dodged it. And they're right about it. Look, there are even people who were dragged kicking and screaming into the military establishment who hated it, absolutely hated it from start to finish, who 50 years later said, boy, I'm glad I did that. Listen, we're going to run out of time. People are waving at me. I'll take this question, and that's the end of it. Sir?
I think that's a question time.
Oh, that was a question. I'll do whatever you want.
Well, just very quickly, my name is Louis Camacho. I'm a graduate of the Film Academy and one of my film talents at the time. And I've worked with vets since I got out of the military voluntarily. I got out right before Desert Storm, literally 2 months before Desert Storm. I basically had no services when I got out, but the guys that went to Desert Storm after me were like, like you said, as heroes and stuff. And my question is, was it that stark of a difference for you when you retired and you saw the difference compared to your friends that got out right after they served their first 4 years or 8 year commitment? Did you see the differences, what they went through and what you went through?
No, I didn't at all. I thought I had a head start because I'd been in the service. And actually, I rapidly overtook a lot of people who got MBAs and so on, principally because I had so much responsibility when I was in the military. But you're right about services. I mean, we do much better now. Look, it was Vince Lombardi who said, time's nothing. Timing is everything. You had crappy timing. And so did I.
Well, I've also lived in Puerto Rico, and they're still like 20 years behind in VA services there.
Puerto Rico is a separate case altogether, as we well know. I mean, there are a lot of problems attendant to Puerto Rico generally, about the politics in Puerto Rico, and what needs to get done down there. I mean, it's a bloody paradise, and it's a shambles. So again, it's the same thing like you got out, no services, the guy 2 minutes after you, plenty of services. Like I said, time is everything, timing is everything, and politics is everything. You know, it's useful to have fought in a popular war. I mean, the greatest increase in the economic well-being of this country occurred after the Second World War, and really quite by accident because we had the GI Bill. And the purpose of the GI Bill was that all returning veterans, 20 million of them, wouldn't be on welfare. We got to do something with these guys. Look, here's an idea. Why don't we send them to college? And what came from that was the best educated generation in American history and the biggest increase in economic well-being in the 50s and 60s than we've ever seen, and it was all timing. One more and then we, sir.
First, I want to say thank you, sir, since I'm close enough and sitting up in the front.
Aren't I tall now?
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Michael Hagan. I've had the distinction and honor of serving for 23 years, past 23 years, and love being in the military, and I've had friend after friend get out and wish that they didn't, so that's why I've kind of stayed on a little bit. I definitely feel like listening to you, one, I so appreciated your humor. Sure,
well, you got to laugh, otherwise we send you to Iran. Some other place where they don't laugh.
And
North Korea.
You seem like you just have a lot of different things that you could do and a lot of things that you've done. And as you look down and think about your life, I wonder, as I was sitting here, like, what out of all the things that you've done do you feel like now or even this period, that has been maybe the most rewarding, or where do you look to put your time, energy, and effort now? And we're here, I'm actually a member with the Veteran and Film and Television organization, and we're trying to get ourselves motivated to start up an East Coast chapter that is a little bit more equal to what's going on the West Coast. So there's already one existing.
Yeah, great idea. We talked about that today. Well, the most rewarding thing I ever did professionally was to serve in the military establishment. I mean, I enjoyed being around people who liked serving, and I think I had some influence on people who followed after me. The most rewarding thing I do now is revolves around the Medal of Honor Foundation. I'm the co-chairman of the Medal of Honor Foundation, which is an organization that was founded, I don't know, about 14, 15 years ago. And the purpose of it is to serve the interests of the Medal of Honor Society. Medal of Honor Society was chartered by Congress in 1958, and its membership is the living recipients of the Medal of Honor. When I was first decorated, there were almost 400. Today there are 79. Statistically, except for the young guys from Afghanistan, in a dozen years there will be 0 left. And those of us who are a little bit older, a few years ago decided that when today's gone, it's gone forever and you can't get it back. And what we really thought our legacy should be is to influence the attitudes and the values of the next generation. So we put together what we call a character development program, which is a curriculum with all the lesson plans already done, using the oral histories of Medal of Honor recipients, many of whom are already gone, thank God we got them on video, to teach things to middle schools and high schools like service and sacrifice and patriotism and diligence and all the rest of that stuff. It's been hugely successful in changing the attitudes of the next generation of kids. The downside is that our educational establishment is terribly fragmented. In New Jersey alone, there are like 6 times 10 to the 23rd school districts, right? So, I mean, we don't have a centralized government with respect to education, so Secretary of Education or anybody else can't say, okay, this is going to be in the curriculum. No, we're not doing that. So it's basically 79 Medal of Honor recipients going around proselytizing everywhere we possibly can to get this curriculum introduced to middle schools and high schools. I'll tell you one anecdote about it, and then you'll see how important it is, and then I'll shut up and we'll quit. When the Erie, Pennsylvania School District was partners with us in putting it together, we got a small grant from the GE Foundation, who was heavily involved in it. They like to give money for education. There are quite a few foundations that like to give money for education. We went there and begged for money, and they gave us some money to put this together. The Erie, Pennsylvania School District, educators, administrators, principals, vice principals, they threw themselves into it. It took about 2 years or so, and they put this curriculum together. And then tested it out in Erie, Pennsylvania before it went out everywhere else. And I remember this like it was yesterday when I saw the video. You could download it for nothing. Back in the day, it was in this big loose leaf binder. I remember seeing this kid, bad school district. 85% of the kids are at risk. No parents, living with grandparents, mother's a prostitute, father's in jail, and so on. All that stuff. Really tough, rough, tough place. This kid who was like 16, 17 years old, a real gangbanger, tattoo on his neck and all that stuff. He's got on his lap, talking to the camera, he's got the curriculum. The most cynical person you'd ever want to meet anywhere. And he was asked, what did you think about all this? And he points to the loose leaf binder and says, I didn't know any of this. And then points his finger accusatorily at the camera. Why didn't I know any of this? We are all responsible for the next generation. He was pissed off that it was our responsibility to teach him what he needed to know, and he felt shortchanged. Thankfully he got it, but he felt shortchanged there are millions and millions of kids just like him, just like he is. And we all have we recipients feel a responsibility to it, and I like to think that everybody else also feels the same responsibility. Education is the single most important thing you can possibly do. You want to save the country? Education. You want to save the world? Education. We want to save people, education. We recipients feel that very, very strongly, and that is the sole thing that we do. So that's the way you change people's lives and how you change the country for the better. Look, I'm not going to talk anymore. I've already blabbed on incoherently.
One alibi, sir.
Yes, sir.
First of all, thank you for giving us this talk this evening. So my name is Brian Smith. I'm a 20-year Army veteran, and I worked in NBC about 2 years ago. So I just want to acknowledge first Mr. John Powers in the back there, because he's been a great help when I was in NBC working to try to get
He's okay.
Yeah, he's a great guy. I took some filmmaking classes at NBC. So my question is, when these students come out of these film schools, Los Angeles Film School, NBC, when they're working over at the New York Film Academy, Parsons, all these schools, how do they get the next break to get into the film industry? What advice would you give them to get through that?
Oh, well, first of all, you got to be persistent. The second thing to remember is that almost nothing happens without some networking. And if we sit down and think about it, initially somebody says, who do you know? I don't know anybody. But if you sit down and think about it, you have pencil and paper, it turns out that you either know people or you know people who know people. We're going to work hard at the New York Film Academy to set up, to get networking working. But that's the way that one gets anything. It happens because you know somebody or you know somebody who knows somebody. It is essential but insufficient to have good skills. You're not going to amount to anything unless you have good skills. The next step, obviously, is to market them. And marketing the skills is the next thing that we're going to do. But yeah, it's vitally important. It's an interesting business that requires a great deal of talent. There's a great deal of talent coming out of the New York Film Academy, and we're going to do our best to make sure it gets disseminated. Look, it's been great being with you. I'm going to stick around for a little while.